Namaste. Welcome to another episode of Yamsak's ASMR as we go through the Bhagavad Gita whispered. Today we are reading the 13th chapter on the nature and the soul. So please join me, get yourself comfortable, and please be affirmed that you are allowed to be here. This is a great chapter for students of Vedanta, those who wish to study the philosophy of the Vedas, humanity's earliest known revelations. This chapter is about the two primordial aspects of this existence, which were divided from the original one. From that one appeared two. Let's talk about that. Arjuna's mind becomes somewhat stable as he listens to Lord Krishna's magnificent discourse. This is after 2 chapters ago in the 11th chapter where Krishna revealed his cosmic form by Arjuna's request and by his later request to get Krishna back into his human form. He has returned to that personal form as well. And in the last chapter, Krishna started discussing the nature of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of loving devotion. He becomes absorbed in Krishna's teachings and seeks to learn more. So Arjuna asks Lord Krishna, the Prakriti, the material nature, and the Supreme Spirit, which perhaps may be translating from Purusha in Sanskrit, which are these two aspects I am referring to. Prakriti is the nature, the material existence, and Purusha is the spirit which pervades it, the consciousness, the soul. He also wishes to inquire about the field and the knower of the field, which are analogous terms, the field referring to the object of experience, Prakriti, and the knower of the field referring to the witness, the Purusha. Arjuna also wished to inquire about knowledge and the object of knowledge, which are analogous terms as well. All of these I wish to learn, O Keshava. That's how this chapter starts. And there's a kind of meta layer of commentary happening here, since he's asking about the field, which in Sanskrit means kshetra. Actually, they're on a field right now, a very well-known field called Kurukshetra, which is the battlefield of the Kurus, the army that they're fighting against. And the knower of the field is Kshetragna, which means the knower, the visionary of the field, the one who sees it. This has been a big metaphor this whole time in this Mahabharata conflict in the Bhagavad Gita, that this battle refers to something more inward, where a field simply refers to the objects of our experience, and Kshetragna refers to the witness within. Alright, very philosophical chapter this is. Lord Krishna begins. This body, O Kaunteya, is called the field, and one who knows the truth of it is called the knower of the field, by those learned sages who know them. Know me as the knower of the field in all fields, O descendant of Bharata. Knowledge of the field and also the knower of the field is knowledge, in my opinion. What is to be known? The nature of this field, this body, the nature of the witness, knower of witness of all witnesses, the Paramatma, the higher self within all Atmas, within all selves. What that field is, how it is, what are its changes, its forms, whence it is produced, who he, the knower of the field, is, and what his powers are. All that hear from me in brief. The seers have sung about the field and the knower of the field in many ways, in various hymns, referring to Vedic verses, and also by the rationale and convincing words in the Vedas, indicative of the Brahman, the Supreme God, the ultimate reality. The 5 great elements, I believe these are Akash, space, Vayu, air, Tejas, fire, Apas, water, and Jalam. No, sorry, that's another name for water, Jalam, and Apas, and Prithvi, earth, make up the 5 great elements. Ego, identification with the body, intelligence, and also the unmanifested modes of material nature. The 10 senses, which refer to the 5 karmendriyas, the organs of locomotion, and the 5 jnanendriyas, the organs of perception, and the one, the mind, and the 5 objects of the senses. Desire, hatred, happiness, sorrow, the aggregate of all these, consciousness, fortitude, the field, with its modifications, various forms have thus been described in brief. This is the nature of the body, being made up of 5 elements, as well as traditionally 4 antakarans in our faculties, which include the consciousness, the chitta, the ahangara, ego, the buddhi, the intellect, and the manas, the mind. And Krishna has described some basic emotions as well. Adding to that, humility, unpretentiousness, non-injury to the innocent, tolerance, sincerity, service of the Guru, the spiritual teacher, cleanliness, steadfastness, self-control, indifference in regard to the objects of the senses, and also absence of ego, perception of the evils of birth, death, old age, disease, and the resulting sorrow, non-attachment and non-association, referring to mental detachment with child, partner, home, etc., and constant even-mindedness on the attainment of the desirable as well as the undesirable, and unalloyed devotion unto me without separation, inclination to live in a solitary place, distaste for society of people, steadfastness in the knowledge of the self as a soul, contemplation on the goal of the true self. Pardon me, I had a sneeze come up. All this is declared to be knowledge, and all that is other than this is ignorance. I imagine that the word is being translated to knowledge and ignorance here is vidya and avidya. So, that is to say, knowledge and the absence of knowledge. Krishna continues, I will now speak of that which should be known, and knowing which one attains immortality. That beginningless, supreme Brahman, called neither being nor non-being. That has hands and feet everywhere, has eyes, heads, and mouths everywhere, has ears everywhere, and exists in the world enveloping everything, shining through the functions of all the senses, yet devoid of senses, unattached, yet verily the maintainer of all, without material attributes, yet the experiencer of those attributes, existing outside and inside all beings, the unmoving and the moving. That is unknowable due to being very subtle. That is near and also is far, because it is everywhere. And though actually undivided, that supreme soul appears as if divided in all beings, as individual souls. That maintainer of all beings should also be understood to be the devourer and the originator of everything and everyone. That is the light even of the lights. That is said to be beyond darkness, ignorance. That is the knowledge, the object of knowledge, to be reached by knowledge. That is seated in the hearts of all, as individual souls. Thus, the field and the knowledge, as well as the object of knowledge, have been briefly described. Understanding this, my devotee enters my nature. Here Krishna has been describing the nature of Brahman, the ultimate reality, the ultimate object of knowledge. In essence, Krishna declares that only someone who understands him as the Supreme Soul and his own true identity as an individual soul is worthy of being called to enlightenment. To be truly successful in life, we must first understand ourselves. Following that, we should work on cultivating virtues like mental detachment, humility, sincerity, and most importantly, steadfastness in our devotion to Krishna. We must see Krishna as the all-pervading maintainer and enjoyer, as well as the one and only true object of knowledge. Everything else must be regarded as avidya, ignorance. Krishna continues to impart his divine teachings to Arjuna. Know both the material nature and the soul to be, verily, without a beginning. Know the modifications as well as the attributes to be born of material nature. With regard to the creation of effect and cause, material nature is said to be the cause of all material effects. In the matter of experiencing happiness and sorrow, the individual nature of the particular material being is said to be the cause. The individual soul, situated in material nature, verily experiences the attributes born of material nature. Contact with the specific attributes in its current life is the cause, the deciding factor of its next birth in good or evil wombs. The transcendental person in this body is also spoken of as the spectator, the permitter, and the maintainer, the enjoyer, the great Lord, and also the Supreme Soul. One who thus knows the beginning and the material nature along with the attributes of material nature in whatsoever situation will not take birth again in this material world. Some, by dhyana yoga, the yoga of meditation, see the Supreme Self in the individual self, the soul, by the self, the mind. others by Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, and others by Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. Others, however, not knowing this, worship me, hearing about me from others, namely wise sages. They too, devoted to hearing about me, verily cross beyond death by attaining liberation through this yoga of worship, Bhakti Yoga. O best among the descendants of Bharata, whatever object comes into being, unmoving or moving, know that to be coming from the union of the field and the knower of the field. He actually sees who sees the Supreme Lord. Or I should say, they actually see who sees the Supreme Lord existing equally in all beings, the imperishable existing in the perishable. This is a metaphor for having sight. Compared to those who are spiritually blind, a true spiritual sight means one who is able to perceive the Supreme Lord existing within all beings. That is true sight. Indeed, they who see the Lord equally situated everywhere does not destroy the self, the awareness of being a soul, by the self, the false ego of being independently situated, and therefore attains the supreme goal of the Lord's companionship. And they see who sees that all action is indeed performed in all respects by material nature alone, and the self, God, is the non-doer. When one realizes that the diversity of beings is actually situated in the one, and spreads forth therefrom, they then attain the state, the nature of Brahman, being without beginning, and being devoid of material attributes. This imperishable Supreme Self, though dwelling in the body, O Kaunteya, neither acts nor is tainted by the effects of karma. As the all-pervading space, because of its subtlety, is not tainted, so too the self, the individual soul, though situated everywhere in this body, is not tainted. And that's a lovely metaphor about space itself. No matter what happens within space, space itself never becomes damaged by what happens within it. There's nothing to damage. That's why they call it space. As the one sun illuminates this whole world, similarly, the knower of the field illuminates or gives life to the whole field, O descendant of Bharata. This is another wonderful metaphor for our consciousness being that which illuminates this whole field of experience. You might say, well, no, it's light that gives rise to sight. It's vibration of air that gives rise to sound, etc. But truly, without consciousness, no light will be seen, no sound will be heard. It would be like the age-old question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one else is around to hear, does it still make a sound? By this principle, yes, it makes a sound, but no one will be there to experience that sound. And so if we identify the sound by our hearing, then it will not be occurring to anyone. In the same way, with a conscious witness, does light truly become illumined itself, the light of lights that we mentioned a few verses ago. Sound of sounds. emotions. They who, through the eye of knowledge, know thus the difference between the field and the knower of the field, and understand the process of attaining liberation from the nature of being, or the nature of the being, that is material nature, reach the supreme by thus achieving liberation. Beautiful chapter. Just some commentary before we end. In this way, Lord Krishna beautifully exposes the truth about the relationship between himself and us, the created material beings. Being outside the dimensions of time and space, he is eternal and unborn. He is the Brahman, the everlasting, all-pervading, all-powerful Supreme Soul, and he has created all beings, whether dwelling on earth or elsewhere, like gods and demons. Each of such created beings carries a minuscule part of that infinite Supreme Soul as a tiny individual soul. The Lord is also the creator of Prakriti, his material nature. When a soul comes into contact with material nature, it loses its memory, forgets who it is, and attaches itself to material objects and to other similarly deluded souls. We must understand, as Krishna declares, that he, in his superior nature, does not engage in any material activity. Only his material nature, Prakriti, is active in the material world. The contact with material nature evokes a range of feelings and emotions such as happiness and sorrow. We must rise above those, as suggested by Krishna multiple times in the Bhagavad Gita. Rising above these emotions, born of material nature, is crucial for attaining liberation. In fact, it is the attachment resulting from contact with nature that causes continuous rebirths in various kinds of wombs, until the soul attains the necessary wisdom and works to liberate itself. Therefore, our task is to realize who we are and get back to where we have come from, God's supreme abode. There are several ways to do it: gaining knowledge about God and the soul, meditating on the Lord, working for the Lord, and engaging oneself in the Lord's devotion wholeheartedly. That is to say, Jnana Yoga, also called Sankhya Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, I think also works, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Now, that concludes this chapter, but in the following chapter, the kind Lord expands on the various kinds of attributes of material nature, the best among them, and our role in relation to these diverse attributes. So, thank you for listening. I hope that this reading of the Bhagavad Gita has been relaxing and inspiring. Namaste.